Gosum Kuba Chimbuko, Sanchez, Jepson, Children, Besamba, Sancho, the same Jepa. Liparsar tap the Ranjin Samakata, Sembana Warshu, Shipa Daure, Tatering Tambo, Tomar Terinke, Tutsu de Nanzutashi, Tuang Jabji Dodurum Bocheke, Tutsuke, Kawanda Bati, Yimbare. Teni ngaranzu changmakin chin jimbanda jila kongke lakchir de nganzu papake paz sebu de imbe wandu tangdu teni Nepal phiya ke visa da bol kanganda chungne teni kongu suphe matho pare ina yang chi la pheb tondala chi nima dunra nyingiranga Delhi le yuje ne teni visa ke tondala Kanganda Mambunang Jason de Tundenda with the Kaya Thomason. Then a Rumbuchi Pemato, but the Sajat Tomba Yude. Then it loved to Rumbuchi number the Tata ADC, Chalenang into Zuke, the Sajat Tomba Chade to Chuki, Inji Minichi Labgogore, and the Sungudu, the Sane Rang Yungu Mares and Agumba, Sangma Shuyabe. Sawa rani nangumantu chikta sewan dabunda sego marwe inchi mechi chorang ke jego re so na ka tende nangudu teni chi kharse goro ko bet ngarang ne tha che na ta ti chan yung mare nga chege men lamne ngunzo ruba ka ju ke chondul hensam thangbo dende temde chimbo dende che kap lang dende che na chi temde la no sare te lame ke ka te cha ma thobne teni Lasso Majun Tomendachi Chungsumato, Uni Nakichi. Oh, sorry.
As you know, and this slot in the program was supposed to be filled by Kyabji Dozong Rinpoche from Tashijong. However, he was unable to obtain a visa to come to Nepal. It wasn't as if he didn't try to obtain that visa, but he went to Delhi and made the application at the Nepalese embassy, but because of his status as a Tibetan refugee and only having a refugee passport, they refused him a visa after 2 weeks of kind of continual traveling to the embassy. So the program organizers here, rather than leave the slot unfilled, insisted that I, being from Tashijong, would come and would give a talk. So no matter how hard I tried to excuse myself, they wouldn't accept my resignation. So I'm here before you, but in terms of giving the talk, then I've tried to excuse myself. However, then due to the Amitabha Center's insistence, then I kind of find myself here before you.
Tini nesu tendende chire, tin ta chigma shubha sevalan ngandende ma tadu mangchia gindumba namba. Tini labtu khilop givishinye dende mangbo chike khatula ta nganda chike chig shugona uni nganzu ngochaya da botda chi. Tendende chi chagudu garirese na nganzu khamba ke tampela uluna na chiyu langu mishipa mesiya da botendere. Ranga amtha nana kariyo ngaranga haku gurwa ngaranga yontin kariyo ngaranga haku gure cheranzo hige mare dende inde kerlo gebishini mamboche kindu dene ma khalo ne chi lab goya te nga shidrakin servo munne tane khadewo menda shidrakin servo de to karinsna ngane shya lawi mya chi yo mare chi ta nga chi gomba ke mengda chi ta ja den khembunda chi ke mengda chi ta yore penna tamzip nanya raba chenla singes ta ya wa chi yore Tenan Shindachi Chadi Yorimatoke, Galishidas, Ke Chinambala, Sabashuya, Kaya Yumare, Chitene, Nitende, Tiring Pardo, Labru Gavishin, Kanga Kechi, Maranson Dubaka Juk, Luju, Chumjung, Lasopata, sabla jacheba mangpochi shoot sabare, Charanamba ki sen sabare, Tiringi Sabachita, Shuyas Kanya Nisa Mare, Tobja Gobja Chikta, Chik Zogorwa, Chutu Nikringate Lamashia, Zogorwa, Randes do Chik, Tatil Chik, Drachapo Chikda, Achi Nimbu Chikda, Tanyamling, Kota, Tanta Pasha, Tanda Naka Karishik Marete, Tini Shisa Marete, Nata, Maju Tumenda, Tende Chasum, Shubu Katula. Then non true labo, second non true, tongue non true, last opportunity, Chinamba Kanga Ngala, Gundan and Rochi Shuai.
So if I were to refuse the request outright, that would really rather ruin the auspiciousness which we've gathered here to having this meeting or this council. So I find myself then in an awkward position where I hold the title of Kempo, even though I do not deserve this title. And you may wonder why I'm continually saying this. Well, as we say in Kam, that you know your own qualities. What this means then is that I know my particular qualities. You, perhaps just through seeing me, may assume, oh, he has these qualities or those qualities, but really you do not know what qualities I have. So I myself know this, and I know that I do not really know anything, and so I'm unable to offer you anything which is really kind of profound. Yet nevertheless, as we say, that we have a kind of a designated name. So I'm just like the young Brahmin boy with the big nose and the broad brow who's given the name of a lion. Of course, he's not a lion, but just because of his facial features, he's given the nickname of a lion. So in a similar way, I've been given the nickname of Kempo, and as such, then I've been kind of requested to give a talk. So in terms of the subject matter, it's not going to be anything profound or anything kind of vast, because in terms of those types of teachings, you've already received them from over the past few days. So as much as I'm able, then I'll try to give you a kind of the kind of essential points as I know them.
Tini inaya ta karanta tering samnuchi kordu ngarazu donju padin rugwe ke labdrun khemang gebishini tamata tini dedin ki chimda phomo changma lenchedu tering zamne nzo gabu chibo senaya mendo temre zangbo senaya mendo dinde che khatula chi ngake tambi chukin reba chi shuja ke kokap raba tela so chine nga pe masike sembala chorwa karse gora chi mandaba chi legido chorwa mandaba kandel legido sen chi ngarang mune jewa ngama ya chi te chi sonam sa ya ba ka gongsa chi mendo dende ko kokop zangbo chi thubya da le lawo marewa dende chi thub song san semba chini nga yang gawo yandu.
So in the presence of all of the great masters gathered here, the assembled Sangha, the kind of benefactors and so forth, I have this opportunity to talk with you about the Dharma. So from my side, I have a rather a strange feeling. If you ask what that strange feeling is, it's a feeling of, well, perhaps in the past I have kind of gathered quite a lot of merit. For in order to be able to speak to you, I would need a great amount of merit. So I do have that feeling from my side.
Tini ta teringe shuya da botela ta shida ajase chimbo shibala ka sungwa nangji re hunchi mabzungwa yan derjo me dezo kepan dala yo me te desi yendun samba dala me sen me mangbo chi song di jeng na rangi yi la gom se ngen de cham se gupa yo re nge ngarang gom butong dala chamba yin se ya chik de sung yo re te chung kepa chimbo ke te chik ta teni maung ba ke duza jebo semchin tam chi ngaja chak butong dala khingba chungbo ke tam ra bo ten re teni ngarang ki tanda me se ya te ngune ton la ne pe me te re ma to shibala ke me te mare inayang teni pangum papa ludu ke oma shipete na la teni tupa chimbu ka ni ni guji chuji ta yang thos chu ma je dotal le ji gundi guji ne chekar ne de chete me je la song lopon chimbu ludu ke jabu desi zangbo la tende sung ya re tende ba jabu du tende de ta jabu desu zangbo chu ke sangji chumden de ke ka ningu je mangbo je chu ke hakko de yo res shugoya mendus ina oma shipitin dillatene churang ka sanje ke huma ka gar chemba ta so tamche hlapar do ta Sandem Dachi Chagres, Penna, Dotelam, Junakan Kangbati, Tambune Kabu Redi Yore. Kabu Redi and Semu, David Rizati Sharvaina, Chi Cardundoba, Hakbar to Cardundogre, Tenanshi, Lobun Lodubke, Shipiting Telatena, Jabu Churanka, Yonte Telata, Karsegora, Pakatundachan, Yajidogre, Yachi Yore. Petenanshi Naka Robsachi Shuain.
So, as the great Indian master Shantideva mentions, that I'm not somebody who's particularly learned, neither am I one who has a particularly altruistic attitude. So within the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, in this particular section, Shantideva continually says, I do not have this, I do not possess that, etc. So probably the reason why Shantideva, who certainly possessed all of those qualities, wrote in such a fashion was to curb his own pride, and also so that the people who would read his book in the future wouldn't have an inflated view of themselves. So I can sit here and say, I do not have this quality, I don't have this quality, I'm not this, I'm not that, etc. But I want to emphasize that I'm not like Shantideva in this regard, who certainly had those qualities, but continually repeated that he hadn't got those qualities. Rather, I'm just somebody who doesn't have the qualities, period. So in terms of the kind of gathering here, the fact that I've got to say something to you, then rather I think that it's better to think along the lines, both from my side and from your side, of the letter which Nagarjuna wrote to his friend, who was the king of the, his letter to their friend by Nagarjuna. In there's a statement which says, even though I do not possess the qualities of a composer, I do not have the beauty of a poet, nevertheless, you, king, please listen to this inferior, the advice contained in this inferior letter, and be as a chalk-colored house or a whitewashed house in the moonlight. What this means is Nagarjuna is saying to his disciple or his friend, who was the king of the region and his benefactor, that you're somebody who is learned in the Buddhist teaching. You do not need to learn anything newly from me. So you're like the whitewashed house, something that is, of course, by its very nature, white. However, the beauty or the whiteness of this white house gains even more beauty or gains even more whiteness in the moonlight. So in the same way then, if you have the qualities gleaned through hearing the Buddhist teaching, then do not shun my discourse, because it just serves to increase the qualities which you already possess, just like the white house in the moonlight becomes even whiter.
Tene tereng shuya ningdong ko chobunda deta karsikura nganjo ngarang tsabelama pal dokamba kamdurum bochi kurab jepa kabjan tonju nimake tene ngarang chon rukwa kaju ke chu ko se gore chota chumjung se gore cho pe durduji phone chu shone cho peundo kalingbone tende dikcho sana khore ke jacham nang jawa tende ke durduji yore durdu nani durdu ngarang durdu rabo chene tik thola rob chachi tangbo ngol shuya chida tene ngarang chu namju ngarang chu kaju pa changma ke labde yala tawa saje chembo gomba naru chudo sonyamro sobar nyong ko do sena labde ya chita sui suda sutawena na chi gadu khal thunde ban rabo chi tendere eni tawa saje chembo se ya de garere se ya da boda chite ta chaje chembo mahamudra se ya da boda tendere se ya da bo ma to ke ta ngarang ka kan shig mare te ti te chachi ti number nimbo te tropic se gore so ta chuchen da bo te le ti ni ne ngarang ti chachi gar shu shi shi shuya da bo tende yin tini saja chimbola chitang mangbo yore te saja chimbo singendra ngade mena meme yinsen singe de radak japore chalta dembare topda dembare singela meg mena tini phentho yo mare pe te yendo saja chimbo te tawa thamji kanane lama tawa thamji kanane japore ngading de mashi ba yena chakching ngading de mashi ba yena singela meg na me pa nang shi re song du du ngake ngading ko la ti chachi shuna sanggodu.
So what I will explain to you is the kind of essence of a little book, which in and of itself is the kind of essence of the Drukpa lineage, which was written by my teacher, he comes from the eastern part of Tibet, or from Kham, who's known as the Khamtrul Rinpoche, or Dogi Nima. And he wrote this little book in Kalimpong, which comprises the essence then, the essential instructions of then the Drukpa lineage. So within this then one finds the short instruction for the great perfection, or Mahamudra. So in terms of Mahamudra, what that actually is, in terms of it being the kind of lion's roar, the king of the views, etc., why that is, etc., is explained. And in general, in the Kagyupa tradition, we can talk about the view being of the Great Seal, or Mahamudra, and then the meditation being of the 6 yogas of Naropa, and then the conduct being of the cycles of equal taste. So here then, if I can try to go through the essential key points of this instruction in a very abbreviated way, this will give you the kind of key point then of the fivefold kind of Mahamudra.
ngarang ke chabilama khamdu rumbuchi kumtring somba je ngawang kunga tenji ke tene chu number takpar senghi chu number takpa sendu yongke ka kangza chola chundre chiksum shu sedo chundre tela tene dangwa sershu ma senghe je yore dina la chakchin ke pe ta ko te che yungure tende ndu tjuna ne chik kambo khashin ngarang ka chu thu je ne shuya da bu kan chajin da bu tende yin yang ma shubi khatula tene hamse je dawanda bo tende ta shu goya te maden ba tende yung du te tan charje da bo tende yin.
So then I'll base the outline of my teachings on a short book written by the third Khamtrul Rinpoche, Kunga Tenzin, which is called The Essence of Refined Gold, which is then this kind of real abbreviated teaching.
Tene ta ngaranchu karta kurta khasansa mangbo ti shutsare te nganzo po kanje jijong la dubju singda chembo je se yore ti nane te tajo nyimbo tonjo padin khala da ro ke temba rumbo che te tene je thangbo satang ngaranchu dojin chanchin til naro tamar pa mela gambon tha cha pa sen chi ma lo du khanga ke ta chi le lawun da chi lo do gre don do gre chen ten ju ju yung gre te 다 대조게 라라 루준다 보던조 대자지 시고야 된 알아서 추준쟁이 라마타와 조제바지 랭겐다지 차대 요래 랭겐 차대 요도 지때 나랑 그 마지 휴고나 나랑라 된데 주 시다다 요 말에때 주 메나야 데링 마주 까민다 바테 당기 슈차바레 된데 인도 다 투톱 펜나 텔파니 응곤다 지종바에네 tene jagaram phakpi yona tene lane me pa judi chezo ji davzap yene tene ku ngu ojin khandru leng de phenne lumi yishi jin khandru nyenju sende songjo doji ku ni songba tuchin telpa sege yore ta telpa tsam la ma ja ba ta te songjo doji ku ni chu te dangwa shusa ojin khandru leng de phenne dangwa shuba yimba lumi yishi jin khandru nyenju sedu jetang telpa ka telangala me lama me sungu yore mato ke lama chani me sungu yo marwa lama chani me ne damwa kane shu damwa ma shu no thoba kane thop tende du ti jumre re du lama yore tenkin yore te me lama me se ba te ojin khandu leng to ku ngu su pen ne lumi yishi jin khandu nyenju sen ne songjo doji ku ni pa tu chin tel ba san ta ngarang chu tangbo dojin chanchin ya che ne telal thu yore.
In the snowy land of Tibet, there are the 8 kind of spiritual lineages, and within that we find our lineage, Kagyupa lineage. So it's important then to have some understanding of the particular lineage of the spiritual tradition which one would like to practice, and also how then the teaching kind of arose within that lineage. So I'll just give a kind of brief overview then. In general, and we can talk about Vajradhara, Tilopa, Naropa, Mapa, Mila, Gampopa, and so forth. However, what are their unique features and what are their unique teachings? This is something which one should kind of try to comprehend somewhat. So in terms of the first master I'd like to briefly mention is Tilopa. So Tilopa was an extraordinary individual who received the teachings we practice from the formless Dakinis in the Pure Land of the Dakinis. Now Naropa Tilopa is an individual who's famed for saying that he didn't have any lama. So of course, it's not that he didn't rely on any kind of spiritual teachers. If he didn't, where would he have received the instructions he passed on? Rather, he refers to then that he didn't rely on any human master. Rather, in then the Pure Land of the Dakinis, Uming Kandroling, there he received then the instructions of the formless Dakini. So in terms of the first then teacher is Vajradhara, then the second one who went to this Pure Land of the Dakinis and received the instructions therein, this refers to then Tilopa.
Teni tupchin Tilopa tiki loma, teni paldi naru tapare. Naru tapake ta ngaranzu kanga shishi pare lo chuni ke padu Tilopa teni kapsi mambuji che yore. Thar teni tsekna da tsamche tobu yishi ngondu joro chedu tsekna da tsamche tobu yishi ngondu juchunda te jihon teni rangri yishi te ngak lamdi yiji soyo me tilengene jiyan tendo me rangarangin sonla shiparchi songne chalam dopo naru paka ulan hone teni di nakapso teni yang chok yishi sana mendo yang takpa tawa sana mendo bomba gongsuji chochi to songpa tawa tendere.
The second master is Naropa. So I'm sure all of you have heard of and know about Naropa. Naropa was an individual who then relied upon Tilopa as his spiritual teacher and for 12 years underwent great hardships serving his master. But ultimately, through serving him in such a difficult circumstance, he received then the kind of ultimate transmission beyond word and syllables. This then was the ultimate kind of transmission that was then kind of given through then the kind of enlightened activity of Tilopa to Naropa.
Teni tataga jehun den rangre yishi te se yang takpa tawa chaja chimbo se ya te je ngak lam le jude ya ke datsik namba ji irise na mare Drukpa yiji number shipa ke yu jinji tsuji go ne topar saba ke chuji irise na ya te yang mare sung bare rang te kari re se na rang ripi yishi re se ke yore ta te jehun den rangre yishi te ngak lam de yiji soyul mi telengene jian tendo me se ba dagarang sik jikpa jikjang dajin jinki yomla topa na la nasam jomi shira paru sin 마지 많가 남그 오원이 소소랑레 20소열와 송야때다 지원된 랑레 20대 저 랑르비 20그 소열에서야 책 체벌레마도 돈달 천장에 체벌문도 와 된데인도 디 다책게 유르도 주파 말에서 디 따보 그 따와때 사제 첨보색이 요나라 조과 첨보색이 요나라 오마 첨보색이 요나라 담추 두지 교육 색이 요나라 시럽지 파르도 선바세기 요난다 터독 따와 터독 닝동다데 다 다체기 요 말에 숨고요래 다 가르레 때 또야 요 말에서나 자발론치 ram장고 수완단 낭시게 로니 뚜브르온도 템발라 따와 주행 똑부 탄니제 스타텔라 추추 또세바 탄니 잠제그레마도 요 유진 그 초지고네 도자제다 도지제게 니 요레베스네 요 말에 세레와 다티 pena telpake rangre yishire sen dachek samche tene te narupake chetaba jendo chene pena pomba gongsuji choji gone tobu yishu ondu jorchong bateta penche naruta pare.
So then Naropa received then the kind of ultimate transmission from Tilopa. So this ultimate transmission then was given in a medium which is beyond words, beyond syllables, etc. It was given through then the enlightened activity of Tilopa. And he said that when Tilopa uttered kind of words of introduction to Naropa, it was at that point that he cognized self-awareness. So here, when we talk about Rangribi Yeshe, or kind of the self-awareness here, then this is not something that can be kind of understood intellectually in terms of separating the subject and the object, etc. Rather, it is something which is introduced directly through the kind of enlightened activity of one's teacher, and there through them one gains the kind of realization thereof. So the realization then that is beyond word, beyond the subject and object dichotomy, one may wonder, is it possible to understand this or not? Here then, the idea is that through the introduction, one will gain this realization through then the enlightened activity of one's spiritual teacher. So this being the case, the bare awareness or the naked awareness or self-awareness which was revealed, this is then called the kind of view which is beyond words, which is beyond a kind of a thought, which is like the essence of the sky, which is then the perfection of wisdom. This is the great seal, this is the great perfection. Even though one has a variety of names, this is then the kind of bare essence which is laid bare through then the understanding of the enlightened activity of one's spiritual master. And this then is the realization which Tilopa gave to Naropa, who then cognized this in a way which is beyond the intellect, beyond words, beyond syllables, and so forth.
Tini ti tata ke Tilopa ke sung te tang, tata dachin zing ke yom na topa tsek te tang, tene ngaro namjur jiwang so jibji malarepa ke tene dadung jo la jabli ja chang dos. Tarto ku thon ti jopar sepa la sangji chomden de jawa yang takbo jobo sangji chomden de ke ja te kaya ju thugu mare sung bare te karare sana sangji chomden de ke ja da sala ne pe sangjo samba tanzo ko thugre te da tanzo jo ta ne mare chu khurung sab ta na indu tende indu tanzo ko thon la jopa la jawe ja chang dugre ina gomba nyamlen chu ko nam jopa ke nyam slen chu tawcho chi yore Teta ngarang so gomchin na bakin chengere ma to nganzo na hi toge batan jaka chek lab dena nyembu thonga ya mare te thondo te yore kare sena kupa chigla puram chi treba ina kupa la puram treba ina kupa ka puram sagire puram ko ro nyungre puram ko ro kande to ha gure te kupa te la tina ndi ro kande je do sena kupa te lab shig marwa lab shig mare te ku puram ko ro ha gure 대전도 나랑조 사제 전부고 따와서 남도 tartuku tawa te namjopa te ke ondu chepe ne kapso dache ke yolen depare te kurang chorwa te ta tawa tende chi re samba te ta tende yogre tende yendu tata te tsek da chamche topu yishing ondu churwa res naro pa ka se du tsek da te kare res na ta tende da chele se yores.
So this is the ultimate kind of realization which is beyond word or beyond expression, beyond verbalization. Even the Buddha cannot explain this directly. Rather, it is beyond expression. However, it's not something that doesn't exist. Those of you who practice will know that this experience of one's awareness exists. But this is beyond then the kind of classification of language. It is beyond then the kind of intellectualization, etc. So those of you who have that experience will know kind of what I'm talking about. But for the kind of intellectuals who just hang on the kind of play of words, etc., maybe it doesn't sound too pleasant. But nevertheless, this is something which is beyond then kind of words. So this is then what can be rather experienced through one's diligence or diligence in one's practice. And the experience then, once one has it, if you wonder to yourself, well, what would it be like then, this experience which is beyond words? So here we would use an analogy of a mute who's eating then molasses. So molasses is like a sugar cane. So when he or she takes that on their tongue, they'll experience the sweetness, but they are unable to express it to others. So in just the same way, through then receiving the kind of instructions of one's teacher, laying bare then one's awareness, one then practices it, has that experience then which is beyond expression and beyond thought.
Narupa keta loma tene kenyi nabu bonso sabsan dambang abda mardung chuju ludu sengeta marpa chuju ludu ke tene dubju ngaranso tatandi ke tembe lamsu thomar te bo kanchi ji jungla se ngwe te ta sure tene dubju marpa locha are.
So the student of Naropa who brought the teachings to Tibet is known as Mapa, the great translator, Chugyalodro.
Tene marpa ke chitang ke ta tharto ke tawa ke dondo chosa date Naropa da ngabda metre patende namba nimpo te yimba te marpa rang ke sungur ko na yang ninjong de yore pena marpa ke sungur che ke na la sharchubo kangin ram do sen je metre chembu ka dile yichuni cheba me pato sem tongba ni la barnjin se ton tu da nyungping obon thong kosom mata lenche jal me khobu tupa tene che sona ngabda marpa ke tene chuo kangin ram ne metpa chembu kundu ne saje chembu ko tawa ko domdo cheba imba Tendeketa, Mapa Kunreke, Sungur Nana, Shendoneja, Sabluchochin Jungu.
So Mapa was an individual who traveled from Tibet, the land of snows, to India, and there relied principally upon two teachers. They were known as Naropa and Mitripa. And it is said then in his songs of spiritual realization that these two were the ones who kind of introduced him then to the kind of nature of his mind as the kayas of the Buddha. And in particular, it was Mitripa's instructions of the Great Seal or Mahamudra that allowed his kind of understanding or realization to blaze.
Tini marpa keta loma zo rang luso la chane mutupa kapsi ningru ke zobo chene toba tonju ji kaba namju ji wonso melarepa ta te ngaran so shumago pare kangan chinjin pare.
Mapa's principal student in terms of his spiritual disciples was Milarepa. So you all know of Milarepa, so there's no need to elaborate here.
Tini marpa kunreke pena zemlang kono la ya melam kajipa kono la sharsu to kachin tsuba me katho to guji dingwa me gudu la gothu chipa me sapthin chi namkha khangwa me inson ne tene son du ju ke melata gothu rechung pa nipo o tende satong ka lobra marpa kunreke zemlang nam le song ya pa ta wo chena ya tende ta melares.
So Mapa, Milarepa's principal student, as predicted by the kind of great translator Mapa, was Rechungpa.
Tende into Chirtang Jagar Papiyona, Tene Se Long the Ripi Gone, Samotomba Niji Ton Senamendo, Tekona Niji Ton, Tenlam Benkin La. Pangong Papa Ludrup Sen, Zomi Yonda, Jabu Kadan Sena, Pangong Papa Ludrup Sen, Zomi Yonda, Bochere. Tejan to Pu Kanchinji Junla, then Nan Gomba Yamling Tone, Tekona Nijeton, Samotomba Nijeton, Tenlam Penkela, then Namjuji wants to Melarepa Sen, Tan Zambuling Changmala, Zomi Yonda, Jibu Tambaji Chadi Yuris.
In India, in ancient India, or the noble land of India, the person who is renowned as establishing the correct view is Nagarjuna. So this is not something that just one or two people accept, and this is universally accepted. And within Tibet, the snowy land of Tibet, then the individual who then set about really understanding the emptiness or the kind of view internally was in the great yogi Milarepa. So this is again universally known.
Tindi Chirtang Tingsung Turabdilla, then Gypsy Malak Namgo drama, the Jacob Pache Ngaki Lusum Hune, Jacob Nishu Changa Chachi Ketola, Milarepa Namgo drama, the Ki Jurtsavare, Seva Konjung, Tingsang Hindi Kelaya Jurgu Yore, the agent of Pache Nepali Kela Meadow. Tende to Kere Jacob Kede Ramanda Sumcha Samji Kela Juna, Chi Gom Yamlin Chenkin Changma Kechi, Melarepa Telape, Sondonda Jetona, Ti Namtar Namgo Drama, the Kangake, Tonan Shibuchi Chen, Longing Tende, Chije Regulana, Tesung Shidaka Tachap Chembore, Tingananzo, Kajupa Tamchita, Teni Papa Tamji, Melin Namgurte Shida, Dakujina Shida, Jawi Ayu Samsanda, Longia Shida, Yona Mena Samsanda. Tende and Dote Melinamguti, Shita, Duza Chembo, Nyanda Chembondache, Re. Kumchi Pema Kapoka, Sung Yorisegdo, Nakete, Musi again Jemanunda. Tende into Kunchi Pema Kapokona, Lipi Yonte, Te Chache, Yovate, Melakam Gumbum Kakadi in Sungwares, Tende Sungudo. Tende into Kangza, Kandechik in Jebena, Melakam Gumbum Te, Ko Lel Havo, Don Sapo, Nenga and Dubo. Tenin Jiti Tamabache can dona ko devo, pay massage, Kepa Chembo Chek Kona, Tela Kojuja Chembo Yobache, Tendi into Tituza Chembo Chita, Tite, Tingsang Kapso, pay massive, Nyanda Chembo Dache, Tende, Chije Tende, Narangla, Tep Nan Doni to go to Karandon, Gagres, Nekatuena, Melangombom, Taburumbochi, Targent and Dona Tacheronso, Pentogres, Kaduena, Shuju, Tende into Tenzo, Melaka Sunguru, Ungombom Tenzo, Nyen, Nyembo Imbala, Koju Sapo Yoba, Ko Devo Imba, chik tende yung ngaranso ka tete che tonu na na yaku yore sangudu.
Again, in terms of Milarepa being universally recognized and known, here we do not kind of need to elaborate on this too much. If we look at the two books which kind of summarize Milarepa, his biography and also his collection of songs, then I've heard that, with regard to the collection of songs at least, that's been translated into maybe 25 languages. So this is extremely popular throughout the world. I believe it's being translated into Hindi now. It's also probably in Nepalese language. So for us Tibetans, when we think of Milarepa and Milarepa's biography and songs and things, so I sometimes wonder, do we really have that much interest? Or are we really paying them as much attention as we should? Because if they were not worthy of our attention, then why is the world at large paying such attention to Milarepa? If there was no interest in his songs, in what he had to say, in his lifestyle, then how come it's become so popular throughout the world? Why is that? So here I think it's important to understand that in terms of the makeup of the books, then the songs of Milarepa are something incredibly profound. But saying that, there's something that even an unlearned person can gain understanding from. There's something that a great scholar or pandita can read and again extract meaning from. So they're useful for everybody. And in terms of one's practice, then the biography of Milarepa is incredibly inspiring. As the kind of Pema Karpo mentions in his writings, and the understanding he has came through then the songs of Milarepa. So for us Tibetans, I wonder if we are really giving the writings of Milarepa the attention they deserve, or the credit they deserve. So I think whenever I travel, I try to kind of tell friends, tell my students that it's very important to continually contemplate on the songs of Milarepa, and in addition to that, read then Gampopa's Ornament for Liberation. So these are very simple to understand, but they have incredibly profound meaning. So also for us Tibetans, then I believe that this is something which is being somewhat overlooked, and I encourage you to then bring out these books and to then start kind of reading them whenever you have the opportunity.
Tini Milarepa la lomitso nima tabu da dawa tabu ni yopenane ta nima tabu te nyami tabu laje te jobu sanje chomjen de yongs tabu do somnane shindene je salbu choje gone long simbe longzin ji jibu tamba kong damba la kadamba da sakchin songje ge damba lam solje tenen chenle shindene je ja chenpo songwa chenle namkha de nyam songwa ka ju kunji tsukji gambo pa sene tende ke tene tabu laje te songbares.
Milarepa's principal disciples, which are like the sun and the moon, are Gampopa and Ritchungpa. So the sun-like disciple, Gampopa, was a monastic who held the tradition of the Kadampas, and he received then the Mahamudra tradition from his teacher Milarepa and combined the two. And thus the tradition of combining the Kadampa and the Mahamudra instructions became renowned. And this is the activity of then the enlightened Gampopa.
Teni nyame tabu lajela khor loma satupji jibu dangji malamba je songyo re. Di nang ne tene sangjin khorwanje ngu tujela koy ko ba jungni cham tong ne ba deshi khamba doji jepo pharu doji jepo sananda deshi khamba doji jepo te pebares.
So Gampopa had a number of disciples, and from amongst those then the more prominent one was from the eastern part of Tibet, known as Doji Gyalpo.
Satupji samba. Satuba. Satangutubake. Satupji samba je satangutubu ishi ni dombake. Ine loma samji machapa yoris.
So from within then his realized disciples, then Dorji Gyalpo, when we talk of when I mention realized here refers to then those bodhisattvas who have achieved the first bodhisattva ground or bodhisattva bhumi. So from within those, the most exalted was known as Dorji Gyalpo.
Dike loma tene topa rangda nyamba puchi jagar chuo kange chunchila tene topa tobe tani jingso chapa
So from within again, he's realized disciples. Then the principal one was known as Pema Dorje.
자거 주복 관계 춘치라 근데 똑반 도부 단인지 용수 찹송바 이다 린칭돼 버리스 페마도지.
So then from within Pema Dorje's disciples, then the principal one in terms of realization, the one who had the king-like realization, was known as Lingrepa.
디 토지세 집부 천조 조버가와 취지자부 장바 자레바선 나라촌 루바가 주겠다 제 중고 선남문도레 근데 장바 자레바 레스.
And from within his disciples, realized disciples, again the one who had the realization or the royal or king-like realization was known as a Tsangpa Gyari.
Teni nipa tonji wangdunda sena, mune wangdu sena, Tsangpa Gyari omi shin kitomba chuku dojin chanchin da gonung la kuyung da segurata kaduk zan gonung la number ewa zani yomare, chepa yomare.
So Tsangpa Gyari was then the kind of very personification of the Vajradhara in terms of activity and realization.
Ina yang doza tumu madang jen nangola chodo gebishi ni ke chodo tong pepne teni tambe nganso zangbo teni lupar to tong yomba pena ngarang zo ke keche shedu ser sawo la wo na wo namkha la chap seya na shi khong gen zenam la phata ne daga za ke gebishi ni ke chuldo tambare te tondo dojin chang da gonong la chepar yomare zemo zene gonglu chungu ke kapso kuje zene 주고 그 남본라 점을 제번 나갑소 양 춘친이 그 점을 난거 요래 춘친이 그 점을 나본 나갑소와 샵소지로 뭐 도용어서 신도 내제 서로 수지고 고대바 파진 지부 담바 그 당신 원다다다 담지 고미도 동난 그 지부 삼지 맞춰가지 손발에서.
So in terms of Tsangpa Gyari himself, then in terms of his activity, as we mentioned, then in terms of activity and realization, he was none other than a Vajradhara. However, if you looked at his common activities, it seemed that he was arisen in the form of a spiritual teacher, kind of like an ordinary person. But the more you look at that individual, then the more quality you can see. Like, for example, if there's gold hidden under the ground, it is said that its natural radiance then kind of fills the sky. So through seeing that radiance, one gets some kind of indication of what's there, and then through one's kind of digging or kind of searching for gold, then one can find actually what's there. So in the same way, Tsangpa Gyari arose in the form of a spiritual teacher, displaying some quality, but then the more that one looks or investigates each person, the more quality one finds.
Tini ton kungmangdo sena tati kongdo shoba jendo konglo lobzong sadu jendo goya daboda tende yo marete ena dozana yang takbo lang tribichedo choki gebishi ni tuma je tembe sul nangne gebishi tadakan dunne tadakan ndotang ngake ta sayamendo ta pena sanang rupene la jamso tabo tende la ta tusamje tarsimbe.
So even though he appeared in the kind of ordinary form as a spiritual teacher, relying on spiritual teachers, and then through his extensive kind of comprehension and contemplation of the sutras and tantras, then became incredibly learned therein.
Dangwa jupa menga da jepa tamchi chachangwa sing semba tsamdu ya yapa mahimpa drupa nyamlin la shindu ne ja kapsi nyingru chenpo che na salam ko yonting malupa teni ngondu sepe chunda bote dubza tumungu ngola tende nangwares.
And in addition, Tsangpa Gyari received the entire transmission from Lingrepa. And not only did he receive it, but he put it into single-pointed practice, and through the kind of through his efforts, then swiftly then traversed the various spiritual stages, achieving then the state of complete and perfect Buddhahood.
Teni lobran kharchune rechongbe terdu beja wan khandu sangsu ronyam kodo kandamza te chotamchi ya terdu tonne teni zopa da chunduchi koche chembu ko ne teni yang ta ba ke tingen zela lo somji ba du yuperengala la sin jongbo dureke bardu chopa tada thamchi te tawe sejin ne teni ne jumunji Juma Maimba, Mugu, Dajin, then Saja Chimbo Topa, Namkal and Don Korba Jindu Sone, Drukpa Choka Komput Ambalishi with Sultan Baris.
So Tsangpa Kyari himself, through then the force of his learning, through the force of his spiritual realization, he was also able to not only kind of receive his teachers' lineages and practice them, but also he was able to reveal the teachings on the cycles of equal taste, etc., which Rinpoche had previously hidden. And it is said that his particular kind of realization of the Great Seal was brought about through his intense kind of devotion to his spiritual teacher and his kind of intense, uncontrived supplication there too. So this is the individual then of Tsangpa Kyari.
Tini Yishijin Kandruman Namji Long Ten Par Zale Tai Nego Sevatan. Tini Yedam Kolo Dem Choke Maopan Shen Deke Tini Sanje Juba Long Tembatan. Tejan Doke Yedam Doji Pamoke Tembarambuchi Sagubi Nyalam Chobji to Chagu Yobaka Longtin La Sopatan the top. Tini and Kandroma Tamchike Shen Deke and Kandroma Tamchike Lama Lakur. Tene ne tenala dawa som jerendo doji chiton cheki yupetse sanje namje la sopa sanje rabdu musun jarne temre nichi sama dangwa samo tamche bomba kongsu chi choji kune semba nangba chibu tamba chires.
He's also an individual who was guided by dakinis and also practiced in secluded places and had visions or beheld the face of many of his meditation deities, such as Chakrasambhava and Vajrayogini and Vajravarahi and so forth. In addition to that, he kind of received teaching. So when, in addition to that, when he had the vision of Chakrasambhava, he received the kind of prophecy that he would achieve the state of complete and perfect Buddhahood within the field where he was at that time. So in addition to that, he became the teacher and received teachings from various dakinis. And it is said that one sitting in one session of meditation, he remained unmoving for 3 months, and in that beheld the face of many Buddhas and received their kind of prophecies.
Tene lama shang se ya tele nyamban zone chen na meng la tene yido jis meng tawares lama shang
So then, in addition to that, he received the kind of name of Yishidorji.
Tene lama ti long tembata, long dorje gombata, tutop linching long tembata, ralong gombata, tene kamba usi long tembata, rog gombata, that thing unto Namji Labda Yatere, near Tena Thoma Pepper Nakapsu, Roma Migo Namkala son and the data of Potenga Dape, Gombetsen and Rota, Chujul and Rupaka Juice at Tawares.
So having received the name Yishidoji from Lama Shang, he also received a number of names which were all indicative of his kind of level of the spiritual attainment. So some called him the kind of the Mahasiddha, or the kind of highly realized one, etc. He also received a prophecy to build a monastery and it said that when he kind of would build the monastery, then it should have the word dragon in its name. So it said that when he went to the designated place to build said monastery, then that the kind of thunder or the kind of sound of the dragon kind of came forth from the sky a few times, and hence that we have the name then the Drukpa lineage, or the kind of dragon lineage.
Dubares. Tendek Lomata Tamche Laya, Tene Kunreke, Niji Damba Sambon Taza Tamche, Kanza, Suso, Jutut and Sambuchutangur. Jetang Munji to Sena, Then Kansa Susu Jutsudan Samba Chushayachi Yorova, Tinsung Arun Sundabonda, then Natabonda Jane, Tiring Karishishi, the Chinzolma, Shuyarimado, Chiranzolo Karaguyo, Karen Doguyo, Chiranzo Tawa de Katsin, Tommy Katsileyo, Telapo Chushatanji Yorova, Munjung Aranzo Kaju Komana Batende Chigre, Tata Tinsung Aranzo Chute, Teni Chiranzo Kanga Ya Kalona, Munjun de Nema. Karishigi on the Tema Joria to Chushetonji Yore. Zongba Jerry Caps Tender Mara, Loman Tsunga Yona, Tsunga Tela, Kansa Susuke, Jutsudan Sambagoni Chuting Yorova. Tendetene Zepachon Waris.
So, in his temple, then Sambakeri gave a variety of teachings to those who came to him for spiritual instructions. So, at that time, it wasn't as it is, as we find ourselves today. The students were instructed according to their individual need and their individual kind of motivation, individual capacities. So it is said that if 5 individual people came for a teaching, then the teachers of old would give 5 different instructions tailor-made to the various students who came, or the various individuals who came to them for spiritual instruction. Of course, this is not the way things are done these days. For example, I'm sitting here and I'm talking, and I hope that you're getting something from this, but I don't know any of you individually, so this teaching is not tailor-made for one individual, rather it's a general kind of overview. However, the Kagyu masters of the past were not like this at all. Rather, they would only give kind of individual students instructions which were tailor-made to suit their individual needs.
Wember Sundemba, Salon Trotatopa, Topi Yishinipa, Shata Remato, Tagaza, Chudala, Detzamba, Lama de Chunienza, Chilolo, Dotarinetini, Tangika Damatan, Kangat, and the Neton Yang, Tende Maimba, Tendeke, Shata to Sona, Teni, Tendaban, Loma Mambuche Chana, Della Ramding Tamasom the Sena, Raptor Sotam, Jinjalunipe, Teng Lao, Le, May, Len Yenta, Yenla, Tende, Korji Bata, Drink the Ojinji, the Shambala, the Singala, Sopanam Sola, Korji Navata, Tamata and Zalendara, Jana Buntatsuchi, Rubus, Natu, Kantu, Zatu, Tamchila, Tende Zane, Korji Tende Navaris.
So it also wasn't a case of just receiving the teachings and then kind of forgetting about them. Like today, when we kind of receive profound instructions from our teachers, we kind of receive them and they go in one ear and out of the other. And then we kind of, or even if we can retain them a little bit, as soon as we walk outside the teaching hall, we can start chatting with our friends and we forget them all. So here in the past, when one would receive these kind of tailor-made instructions, one would not just leave them as instructions, but would rather go to isolated places and practice through the preliminaries, through the kind of the actual practices, until then the actual kind of realization dawned within one's being, and one had then the actual experience of that which was being taught to one. Then in addition to that, one would kind of, through one's practice, either then be reborn in one of the pure lands or achieve then the states of high spiritual realization and continue one's activity within one's lifetime.
Tata ngaranzu chik lavya yoba hundu tungsong chalo jing nyedun resa jese song tingsong chupa pamo chi ngosong chiru ma song ngam song ya jiyo ditu chu ngaranzu re ngumandane tende marwa kong namba pedo re ngaranzu tungsong ke chalo di kulo mabo kanya di chik trai jana ngori ri lu sham shan jaya de penna chimni chime pa rabdu song na chimbala tha ringsa jene teni nyedwa ta doba kan ratha de pha jene Memi Wimberatula, Ray Pussy, Naguti Cook, Jung To Tanson Long La Cor, Onla, Pepper Dabana, she by Dukes about the Ganzo, Robaka Juka, Humal Tende Yorova. Tital Sundu, Hundu, Tonson Chalochi, Nedun Resa Jesset Tondare, Tinson Chupa Pamochi, Mosong Chero Mason Santa, Jendata, Yondata, Tanzuko, Mosong Chip Tondala, Tuzu Zodoya Matoke, Sheda Ranka Susuke, Temba the Gomba Security. Tendele Samnon Doyanda the Pal Ha, Rank Yamni Jayanda the Pa J, Miki Mosung Yadabota, Military Jaya, the Tanganzu, Leka Zunda, the Chado Yaremato, Randunke, Yamni, Padin Drukpa Senatang around Soke, Shivichi, Labdegi Yorete, Drukpa Hindung Zunda, the Kandijele, Munzingu, 간데지 차고요 랑루코도 마죠 바인도 다는 쇼케 남세네 도고마 니마 코코 봐도 드리니만 닝공라 나란 소소 선솔라 남도 간데지 샤르소 루바까지 임베게 땀신 김신라제게 차레 가르낭 요와 가르치 요와 땡아론도 하고 보고 요래 딘데 mendo나 딘데 용와 휴제 있으나 자벨라마라 소반데 예담라 라라 소반데 딘데 용와 줘 딘데 노나 셈발라 가와곰 드린 야고 중수 산이야 딘데 용와 휴제 있삼반다지 먼저 고고 요사래.
So in terms of how things were in the past and how things are today, then there is a discrepancy. So in the past, even if we think of the kind of red or maroon kind of monastic robes, in terms of somebody who'd gone forth from the householder's life, the place that individuals would stay would be kind of well away from the kind of hustle and bustle of the villages or the towns. And in terms of our particular Drukpa lineage, then this was one which really emphasized kind of practice in isolated places. As such, people who would receive these instructions or who belonged to this particular tradition would then go to these isolated places and just practice their meditation continually. However, this is not the way things are done today, is it? If we think about how many people actually put into practice instructions, they are very few. Most of the time, we see ourselves running around trying to forge kind of relationships with people, trying to engage in kind of varying activities, trying to meet people, trying to convert people, trying to do things for people. And in doing such, we kind of forget our own kind of aim. We forget our practice, leaving it to the side, and rather concentrate on things that are not really that important. So it's imperative to understand the falsity of this, and rather than return to the kind of the old ways, if you will, where one's practice was given prominence. Given prominence in the sense that in the past, when one would wake up in the morning until just before one went to bed at night, one would be able to recall the whole day. How much discursive thought did one fall under the sway of? How many kind of discursive or negative emotions did one give rise to? And when one would recognize that, one would then kind of lay it bare in the sense of one would bring to mind one's spiritual teacher or one's meditational deity, and then one would supplicate them and one would make the kind of supplications and confessions, etc. If one found that one's practice had gone well for a particular day, then one would be able to kind of congratulate oneself and meditate on kind of rejoicing in one's kind of virtuous activity, etc. So this is the way things were before, and I think it's imperative that we bring this very important point to mind and try to emulate it now.
Tini ngaranchu ke lama tamba jupe lama tamba kongma sanjing mudan rawa tada tamji ke jinju sanamendu tada tamji ke dangwa 가르 요바데 냠린 쟁이게 딱 나랑서 임베 크다고 지러와 근데 임베 크인데 데다 나랑서 그냥 디 템바데라 샴데 같이 슈톱톱 지셔와 마도 그텔 샴데만도 같이 땡땡도 제거야 된 나랑서 랭겐다 본다 지레 데니 삼노도나 다 단다가 바르도다 나라 추냠네 게와세 가야 메데 당하기 슈마 제기 인 자반다데 보파 망부지를 요래 망부지를 요래데 데라 먼저 감주름 보지 군팅 선바 정아원 공가 된 제게 직송 요래 가르세나 단다데 문도 등의 슈마 제기 인생에 된졸라 로지나 문도 제점송 데르 닝보도 바 제다고 다 첼라 뇽라 쟁이 망송에 말은 좀되는 요만 현진나 바 창마가 라랑 가져서 로 공로 같이 임바 로지나 다 댕알로 같이 친도 랑하고 그러와 다 데른 닝보 줘 받쳤다고도 로 텐저 그런가 될라 닝보 담벨 하주 시야마제 체스마 펜바제 남추스 마송바제 지된 춥지도 마송바 추 시야마제 당가란서 같이 친도 따나 롱압주 그 미제이나 로 니슈장아데 녀데 여러봐 다 로 니슈냥아데 니마레 니슈장아 나네 체가데 칼라사야 자통야 땀나야라 도요지레 다 체가데라 담추 시야마지 제도다면도 랑그랑을 십시에제나 하고 그래서 문도 제점소 데리 힘보 도바쳤다고 힘보 담벌 라주 도바 가른도 아 단다담면도 공다 당아선이 제게에서는 다 체라 뇽라 쟁이 망 다 체라마 망불 하요 말해서 그래 제 라마 때 가르요 바ten tar sinna ta pe yakore te tar singa mare tensong ko turam dela nganzu nguma lo nyeshu sumchungu na chane ko manyong ba ka nacha mangbo do cancel ka nacha siya rupa ke cancel kari cancel ke lancha mangbo chi heya do nguma chane me ba ke chengi mangbo chi yore 제 라마 된 tar sinya la pe masi ba ka kale ka por jala kachi simbaina 제 라마 hida layo mare chu tene 단다랑 제고를 써야지 배나 ngaranchu 가르 다다 바유근데 녀숑쿠들 포라 제주 몰라 요데베네 갑소 곰보체라도제 다다 까문낭사 그치 요바 된 곰보체라도제 추 제니 돈 nga 당부 마 낭란 돈 부구지면도 저 랍자제 잡된 nga 상이야 용거에서도 랍자 고고 말에 추추 제게는 데링데루 다다 랑치소나 야네 곰보체라도제서는 간데게 로마케다 첨보제 잡아요 뺀나 된낭시 지도 뺀나 추체도 된단다지 제고고 여러와 먼저 버릭때 저게 추 신기요래 추 젠도고 로요래 인다 마타바데 야고지 댕기요 말에 안치바 마타바데 용다 용거래 단단다 갈 용지 마바 단단다 갈 용고 말에 생에 망부지래 된데도 상단 직된 치만이 혼도 소용 돌매배 상그체를 만배바 스미체를 배바 레익스 송도와 된데도 나랑 좀 간가 상니 그 다디 좀가 제대로 상니 그 다디 된데 만로바지 가르쳐 그래 라만 나바 그 송도와 나랑 나타 된데 가요 요 말다.
So when we reflect on the kind of masters of our lineage, who are none other than the Buddha in person, we should, as I mentioned, try to kind of emulate them in terms of their kind of quality of their practice. And as much as we're able, we should try this emulation. However, if we are not able to really emulate them, at least we should not kind of bring kind of shame upon the particular lineage. That is to say, professing to practice such and such lineage or such wonderful Dharma teaching, but in actuality just being an embarrassment to the lineage and that we try to practice, and the teachers that we are set, that are our root and kind of lineage masters. So this is extremely important to kind of put effort into one's practice. Now, in terms of our kind of effort here, what usually happens is that we'll say to ourselves, well, yes, I think I will practice the teaching of the Buddha, I'll practice my teacher's instructions, but maybe not just now. Perhaps I'll do it tomorrow morning, or perhaps tomorrow afternoon, or next week perhaps. So here, if we continually procrastinate, then we are not really going to get anywhere with our kind of spiritual development. As Kamchu Rinpoche Kunga Tenzin mentioned in his poem, that often then we get carried away by procrastination. Carried away in the sense of then thinking, tomorrow we'll do it. It'll be done somewhere in the future. But thinking such, then what happens is that we forget the present moment. And in forgetting the present moment, we forget our kind of Dharma practice. So if we look over our life, let's say we're 50 years of age, 25 years of our life has been wasted in kind of sleep and eat and eating, etc. So if we think, what have we actually accomplished in 50 years? Half of the time we've just been sleeping and eating. We haven't been able to practice at all during that time. And of the time that remains, what were we actually able to practice? What were we actually able to accomplish in that time? So here it's imperative to look critically at one's activity and really kind of judge oneself according to then the teachings that one has received. If one puts one's teachings off, then one is never going to kind of get anywhere in one's practice. Rather, we should be like Kinnaur and Nepal, who was a student